Hey guys, this is Charlie. So I wanted to talk about a little project that I've been working on over the last, maybe 3 weeks or so. This is for a Christmas present for my father-in-law, Wink, or sometimes goes by Pappy. He is a huge collector of knives, and aside from that, pretty much has everything else in life that he wants. So I decided I would take a stab at creating or building a knife for him. So I took one of these, so just an old-fashioned file for grinding and sanding, things like that, and I turned it into this. So this is the final product. So I've got a stacked leather handle, a brass handguard and butt plate, and then ultimately the knife itself. So I did finally get an edge on it, so it's pretty sharp. So Merry Christmas, Pappy. This is my first step in making the knife for my father-in-law, and what I've been told is that hardened steel, like steel that is used for files like this, can sometimes be difficult to cut with tools like an angle grinder. I personally didn't have a ton of problems. As you can see, I did a couple quick notches. It didn't take a whole lot of effort. But what I'm going to do is follow the directions that I was given, which is essentially to heat this up until it's red hot. And so I've got it placed, I'm going to place it in a minute here between some bricks and a large stone of my concrete. I'm going to heat it up until it is red hot and then let it cool overnight in a batch of perlite. So really just a non-flammable, it's almost like a loose gravel. So the goal with this will be to see if in fact this does turn out to be easier to cut when I actually go in to make the shape of the knife. Okay, well that was really loud, and it is really hot in this area right now. So as you can see, our file is red hot at this point. So I am going to carefully grab it with a pair of vice grips, and I am going to put it away here. They recommend to let it sit overnight to cool off. Personally, I don't think it'll take that long, but we'll wait and see what happens. Next, I am going to take the treated metal. It should be a little softer, although I tried a little experimental notch there. Seemed like it was maybe a tiny bit easier to cut, but I'm not really convinced on that. So I might have been able to skip that step. Anyways, let's take a look. I'm going to start trimming it down so I have it marked. Basically, this is the tip end of the blade. And then there is the tang. So the tang is going to be a little bigger than my hand. So we'll get a little bit down at the very end. I'm going to put some brass pieces both at the top as the finger guard or hand guard, and then a piece down at the bottom, and then we'll put some leather around here to fill out and make a nice grip. Okay, so I am going to turn on the angle grinder, so it's going to get a little noisy, and we will take a look to see how this goes. Okay, so that is the basic process. I'm going to put the phone down so I can actually use both hands on this guy, and we'll be back once we've got the initial cuts made, and then we'll talk about creating some bevels and be doing a lot of grinding, lots and lots of that. Here's the basic shape now that I've done the cutouts, and then it is a matter at this point of doing lots and lots of grinding. So my goal, we'll see if we get there, is that we'll have a ridge line or a bevel in the very middle, and the both sides will slowly slope up towards that center strip there. So there should be just a narrow spine right up and down the middle of the knife. So I'm going to tackle that. That'll probably be the most difficult piece of this. So lots of grinding. Here's what it looks like after the first bit of angle grinding. Yeah, so it took, I don't know, a couple hours doing that. The plan is to finish this up with a hand file and then start some actual sanding with sanding blocks and sandpaper. I ended up having to break out the bench grinder. So I tried the angle grinder, and it was just way too difficult to try to get any kind of clean edges on this guy. So what you can see here, so this is all the result of using the bench grinder. So it didn't work too bad. So I've got some finishing that I'm going to do here with some 100 grit sandpaper just to get things going. I'll slowly work my way up to possibly 1500 grit or 3000 grit rather. So we'll wait and see how that goes. But this is basically the next step. So here we go. And next up, I'll show you the results of doing a little bit of hand sanding here. So here is the knife after hours and hours of sanding. So I've kind of got a rough polish on it. Next step will actually be heat treating it. So what I need to do is heat it up and then put it in a quick batch of, or a barrel or jar of oil. That'll cool it down very quickly and will harden it. So that will be the next step up. So making some progress here. I'm going to get the blade red hot once again, and I am going to immediately cool it in this big vat of oil. So that should cool it down quickly. And what will happen is it will make the metal really, really hard. It'll be a little brittle, so we're going to do some things to fix that afterwards. I think you can still see that it is red hot here, and I'm just going to plunge it in the oil. There we go. Alright, and so what that does is it cools it off super, super quickly compared to how I cooled it the other day. Alright, so we're just going to let it sit there for just a couple minutes. Alright, and I think that has probably done it. So there you go. It smells like a weird kind of barbecue. So I'm still working on the blade, kind of as another branch of this project. But while I was waiting for some new sandpaper to come in that I'll need for finishing, I am starting to work on the handguard and the strike plate. So that's basically the upper and lower pieces of the handle. The stacked leather will actually go in between these. So this will sit on the at the very top of the tang, right where it meets the knife, and that will actually be the hand guard. So you can imagine your fingers being protected by this to some extent. So this particular piece, this is going to be the top, and what I'm doing is taking this piece of brass. I use a 1/4 inch, which is maybe a little bit thick, but I'm going to go with that since that's what I have. And essentially this bar will be cut out, so I'll use the angle grinder to cut this down. So I'll cut a little section here, very much like I did the hand guard. The butt plate will actually be a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter. So I'll probably cut it, maybe say around here, and just cut straight across with the angle grinder. And then what I'll do, so what I have is a bench grinder, and I just turned it off so you can actually hear things, but basically there will be some grinding action. So that's how I actually carve out the corners, and make this a little bit more of an oval or oblong shape versus just the square. So again, just take it on the angle grinder, grind it down. So I start with this side, which is the coarse. That really chews into the brass, which is pretty soft. And then once I get the general shape, then I take it over to the fine wheel, and that's where I ended up rounding out the last bits and pieces of it. So that's kind of the current step for this one. So next up, so I'll do a little bit of polishing on this one once I break out the belt sander again, just to kind of smooth it off a little bit. And then my next project will actually be drilling a hole and creating a slot for the tang to fit through. So I'll show you what that looks like once I get to drilling. Here is what the knife looks like. This is after I have quenched it. So as you can see, it's got a little bit, actually quite a bit of black marring on it. And so what I've already started doing, I did a quick hand sand, took a little bit of the black material off the outside, and now I'm going to put it on the belt sander. I've got a relatively fine grit, about 220, and I'm going to put it on there and try to get this looking a little more like bare metal. This is seems like it's been hours and hours of polishing and sanding, so starting to get a pretty decent edge on it. Actually, for the first time, there is a little bit of shine as well. So I think we're gonna leave it at that, and then I'm gonna start working on the handguard. Now what I'll be doing is starting to create the stacked leather handle. So basically the way this works is, you can see the brass handguard that I have there. So I've already got one piece of leather on. So what I need to do is take a bunch of these, cut out a hole, a little notch right in the middle there, and that will slide over the tang. And basically what will happen is I'll end up with a big stack of probably 30 or 40 of these pieces of leather. I'll put a little contact cement in between, and that should get them stuck together as well as I need it to. There will also be the end plate that will slide on at the very bottom, so that should keep everything intact. So between the glue, just stacking everything together, and then ultimately putting the butt plate on. For those that don't know, this is what a stacked leather handle looks like to begin with. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit, make sure that I've got the right number of pieces on so it fits the hand well. And then I will put the contact cement, restack these. This has actually been quite a bit of work. I didn't realize it was going to be so time consuming, but cutting a little notch out of these small pieces of leather, and then you multiply it times the number of pieces, it's turned out to be quite the chore here. We are putting on the leather for the stacked leather handle. And essentially what I'm doing here is I'm taking some contact cement just to provide a little bit of an adhesive here, and I am coating each layer, so making sure that I get a decent amount on that. I want to coat both sides. And then I slip on that next piece. So it's a little difficult to do this with one hand, but let's see if we can. There we go. Okay. So that becomes the next level in the stack. And I just repeat this process about, I think, 40 or 50 times. And that will give us the foundation for the handle. This is what the handle looks like for now. I have it in a clamp, just trying to get solid contact between all the different pieces of leather. So I am going to let this cure overnight. Hopefully it'll harden up. So here's an end view of what that looks like. And then what I'll start doing tomorrow is I'll take this to a sander or a grinder, and I will start whittling down the excess material and hopefully end up with a very smooth looking handle with a little bit of a bulge in the middle just for the palm of the hand. And now we'll be sanding down the stack leather handle. So this is going to take a while, but you basically just run it over the bench grinder. Gradually smooth out those edges. So here we have the knife with the general shape of the handle. I've still got a little more work to do up near the top. I couldn't get the belt sander that I had into the corners, but overall it's looking pretty good, just about done. And so at this point I did put an edge on here, so it's pretty sharp and definitely nice and pointy. So here we go, just a little more work to do and we should be done. And now, after hours and hours of grinding down the handle, I think I've just got it where I would like to have it. The final steps here will include putting on some mineral oil. So this will just seal up the leather, darken it a bit. Let's see if we can show what that's going to look like here. And so I'll continue to rub this in. Hopefully get a nice even coating across it.